Welcome, Daniel. I'm very excited it worked out and you're a guest on my podcast. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Conny. Really good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's really awesome to have you. Tell my listeners where in the world are you located, and then also I always ask my guests to share one tiny bit about themselves that has nothing to do with their work, just something that surprises.
There you are. So, look, I am in Hobart, Tasmania. So that is in Australia, all the way down at the bottom of Australia. We're the small island. Next stop, Antarctica. So it's a beautiful place. It's, I suppose, a bit like a mini New Zealand. And something about myself, I live in community. So I bought land with another family more than about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, and we built two houses, and we have our own houses and our own lives, but we share a backyard and barbecue area. We have, I think, 15 chickens between us. So yeah, it's a bit about my life. We do a lot of life with other people, I suppose.
Oh, I love that. That sounds very interesting. And I have chickens too, so we have something in common.
Yeah, they're not laying at the moment. It's so I'm in May,
yeah.
which is heading into winter where we are. And so this is the time where I head out in my gumboots, and it's wet and it's muddy and cold, and I spend lots of money feeding them, and they don't give me any eggs. So I keep looking at them going, you better produce in summer. You really must produce some eggs.
Yeah, I know.
They are my pets
I
as
know
well.
the feeling. Mine do that in November here. So.
Yeah. We should just swap them. So your November chickens can work in my May, and we'll swap them over.
Exactly. Okay, but we just don't want to talk about chickens. Although I find that's a very funny topic because they make me laugh a lot. But we want to talk about making space, and mostly in the digital, like with digital clutter. No, so you wrote a book about it, and I read it almost. Like it was it's a very comprehensive big book. But you say in there that many of us have forgotten how to be unbusy. And I think you're still suffering from being like not knowing how to be unbusy too. But I want to know a little bit what made you write this book. Like when people write a book, they usually have a big why behind it, I find.
Yeah. Look, and I mean, I've been passionate about making space for a long time, and it comes probably out of my personality. I love what I do for work. I love being active. I love creating new things. And, I've had lots of different roles over the years, from being a physiotherapist to a manager, project manager. I've started my own business. I've led in a church community. I've done nonprofit work. And so in all of those roles, sometimes combined, I've always struggled with space and wanting time to slow down and think and rest and not be hurried, and to live. I suppose I would love to continue living from the inside out, where my inner life is at peace, where I know myself. I've had the ability to think my own thoughts, and I suppose work from a place of calm and rest and security, as opposed to what happens when I get spaceless and really busy, and I end up just going from one task to the next, ticking off things off my list, and maybe they're aligned with my goals, but just even the way in which I do it doesn't feel centered. And I've just seen the difference between the type of business which is meaningful and active and achieves things that matter, the kind of business that changes the world and makes an impact in people's lives, compared with the busyness that comes from spacelessness, where it's this frantic, cortisol driven, kind of wired and tired busyness, and there's an anxiousness around that. And yeah, so I suppose I've seen that in my life. I mean, Richard Bach says we teach best what we most need to learn, and I've struggled with space and trying to allow myself to live from the inside out. And I've won at times. I'm losing right now. We were talking about that before. Like the last month has never been busier because the book is just taking off and everyone wants to talk about making space. And now I've realized I've got no buffer in my calendar because I'm telling everyone about slowing down. And I'm like, oh no, this is not going to last. I really need to say no to a lot more engagements. around why we should make space so that I can make sure I stay in that space of being calm. And obviously, I coach lots of executives and leaders, and I just have a lot of compassion for people like me who are always on the edge of maybe I could click my fingers and be in burnout in a few months if I didn't have the habits that are in my book, and that I don't want to head back there again where I have been many years ago.
Yeah, and I think like that is the thin trail we have to walk, when we're ambitious and when we want to do things and when we're driven from the, like you said, living from the inside out, but oftentimes we're also driven from the inside out, and then we're starting to fill our space up with the things that we actually really want to do, but then we run out of space because everything becomes kind of like important and a priority. And I thought it was really interesting to read too, while you were writing your book, you also ended up running out of space and you had to shelf your book a bit. Did you want to talk about that real quick too? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but people can read it in the book. So
yeah, look, if I put it in the book, I'm kind of in trouble, aren't I? I can't really hide
exactly.
Yeah, look, so that was another period of time. Now I sound like I'm always struggling with life, but definitely I found myself. So I think I was leading 2 different jobs at the time. I've got 3 young children, living in community. I serve a lot in my local church community. So there was so much different stuff happening. And I had this passion project, this like Spacemaker, and I was just writing it on the side of my desk. So that's an Aussie expression. My publisher wouldn't let me put it in the book because she's in the UK, and apparently that's not an expression, but it basically means that it wasn't planned. It wasn't my job. I was doing it on the weekends and doing it at nights, and even some annual leave, and when I had time to do it. And I'd been writing for 4 years, I think, and I was pretty close. Like I knew where I was heading. I'd done most of the reading and research, and yet because it was the finish line, I was just working so hard at it. And what I found with a book, I'm an introvert and I do a lot of processing on the inside. And I found that when I'm in the middle of writing, my brain just is totally absorbed in my project, which is a strength. Like I have focus, but it's also bad because, there are other parts of life that you have to focus on. And I wasn't very pleasant to be around. And basically, I just found myself becoming absent and angry and impatient. And there was one particular moment where I think something happened. The kids were arguing and I ended up snapping at them and snapping at my wife. And I didn't smash a glass of water, but I had a tanty and pushed it over and water went everywhere. And then I stomped downstairs and I kicked the door to open it and I left a hole in the door. It's a pretty thin door, but I was like, oh my gosh, I've just kicked a hole in my bedroom door. And I just remember staring at it and thinking, well, you can't hide that. Like I've clearly had a tantrum. And it was just a wake-up call again that I needed to step back. And obviously I said sorry to my family, but, a sorry has to come with actions. And really reflecting on it, I realized that I was writing a book about making space and I had no space myself. And there wasn't any integrity in that. And so, I talked about in the book, I wanted to live by my principles, not just write about my principles. And so I ended up shelving the book for nearly 18 months and put it down. And I really thought that might be it. It was very painful letting go, but I think that's a spiritual thing. I really felt that by letting the book go, I just felt that was, as a person of faith, I felt that that's what I needed to do in order to trust that what I was writing about was true. And then after about 12 months, my wife and I started talking about it again. And 18 months later, we all felt like we were in a much better position. And I picked it up and I took another 18 months to actually finish it and publish it. So it took 7 years from writing to publishing, but we got a great result. And, people are loving the book and I'm really grateful for it.
7 years is a good number, I feel. And so I'm very spiritual too. So I always think like everything happens for a reason. And I'm thinking the book probably became much stronger message because of it. Because like you said, you're talking from experience, not just like once, but several times. And I often feel like when we're talking from experience, and like you mentioned earlier too, then we actually know what our clients go through or what the people that we want to help go through. And then we can come from a completely different place, I feel, than if we're just like telling them, well, listen, you just have to create some space here in your life, you know. and the other person sits there like, well, yeah, easier said than done, no. And you actually can back it up with, yeah, I know what it means. It's
because I kicked a hole in the door. Yeah.
not necessarily the hole in the door, but I mean the whole journey that you went from like almost burnout to getting better to maybe then almost getting into another burnout because of this book, and then coming out of this again, and just the learning that you did with it, and that divine timing in a way. Like, that's why I said 7 years is probably a good number, because it was maybe just not time back then, and now it is.
Well, I mean, what was really interesting is during that, particularly the 18 months off, I mean, because I started writing this book when no one was talking about digital overload. I mean, you had, you know, the classics like Neil Postman and Marcus, you know, look, there are classic authors who predicted the problems, and you had like Nicholas Carr on The Shallows, who was well above his time, predicting the rapid change in our brain because of the internet. But the broader population wasn't aware really, and wasn't having conversations about the problems with being online too much. And so I thought, wow, I'm really, you know, I'm on the cutting edge here. And then by the time I actually had this 18-month period of time off, you had these books coming out, like just being churned out in their hundreds. You know, you had people like Cal Newport publishing Digital Minimalism and others. And I was just thinking, oh, I missed my boat. You know, I missed my opportunity. And thankfully I read a lot of these books and they helped inform my book. But also I was like, no, these guys haven't covered what I've covered. So every time I read it, I'm like, oh, phew, it's not my book. but what was really beautiful, and then COVID happened, and I was like, oh, now I've really missed my boat, because like, who wants to read a book about unplugging from technology when we're isolated and everyone's on Zoom? And I was literally doing the editing with my publisher to publish, and everyone's in lockdown. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible. I've really lost my chance. But actually the timing, like you said, has been really quite serendipitous, because when the book was published, so it was published in June last year. It's, you know, it's right. I mean, it won the award in November last year, and really now it's starting to build a following. And when I started to write the book, I had to convince people that technology overuse could be a problem, whereas everyone knows it now because of Zoom fatigue, because of working from home. They know how wonderful the online world is, but they're just not quite, but they also are starting to lose their humanity and feeling stressed and feeling like there's something about being online all the time that is draining my spirituality and my relationships and my mind, and they actually want to understand it at a far deeper level than the books out there are explaining, and they actually want solutions. And so that is my book. So I was like, oh, actually worked out well. Anyway, long answer, but I agree with you that the timing was very lucky, actually, and I'm very grateful for it.
No, that's totally what I thought. I thought too that now we're all really aware what effects the internet has on us. And you mentioned in the book how many more hours we all of a sudden sit in front of a screen, how many more hours all the children all of a sudden sit in front of the screen because of the pandemic. And we start noticing the effects. And I heard a lot of people talking about Zoom fatigue, or whatever they call it. You know, like you can't be on Zoom anymore. You just can't see it anymore. And it's like so many other modern inventions. It's a curse and a blessing, you know, the internet. It is, you know. So I really loved the first part of your book, where you go deep into the paradigm of the technology and the relationship and all that. Did you want to talk a little bit about that? Because afterwards you talk about principles and practices and everything. But I feel like without that as a foundation, it's maybe hard for people to kind of understand where you come from, and also feeling motivated to actually do something about it.
Look, absolutely. I actually wrote the last part of the book first because it was meant to just be a practical, how do you
Mm-hmm.
unplug? How do you create rhythms of health and space and thinking in your life? And but then the more I read and the more I coached people and obviously talked about this over 7 years, the more I've just come to the conclusion that the idea of turning off your phone, I don't know, 4 meals or at the start and end of the day, or even the hardest of all practices, I think, is having a weekly day where you have no devices and you actually rest
Mm-hmm.
from your work, particularly if you're a knowledge worker. So my digital Sabbath or weekly day of rest, I call it in the book. But I mean, that's pretty simple. Turn off your phone. Like, you don't, it's not hard advice, right?
Yeah,
But it's
yeah,
like, it's incredibly hard to do, to disconnect
yeah.
yourself from your devices and to experience life away from the online world,
Mm-hmm.
unplugged, not connected, undistracted. And I came to the conclusion that actually uh, you have to start with a change in mindset and paradigm. That's why we go from the
Mm-hmm.
paradigm to the practices. Yeah. Because if you don't shift your relationship with the online world, if you don't examine the making and meaning of space and why we're so drawn to technology at multiple levels, we look at it from a brain level, neuroplasticity, we look at it from a heart and spiritual level, so love and worship and why the loves and longings are expressed. We look at it from a power perspective and the power we receive through tech and how that power actually impacts us and how the cultural stories of freedom and choice change us. So I think we need to change our paradigm at quite a significant level because Jamin Fraser, I really like his stuff in Australia, and he says that um, I've got to remember now that behavior is at the end of the assembly line. I like
Mm-hmm.
that. That what he's saying is that we start with story and beliefs, and our behaviors follow that. And
Mm-hmm.
if you just continue to try to change your life at the behavior level, I want to unplug from my phone, or I want to eat less food, or I want to, spend less money, whatever the behavior change might be. If your story and belief around your identity and why you're doing these behaviors doesn't change at a heart level and a head level, then the behavior change won't stick. So really the process of Spacemaker as a book was trying to help us to shift our head and to shift our heart so that again, we don't reject technology. It's definitely not an anti-tech book. I mean, you and I don't know about your life, but I'm online 10, 12 hours a day sometimes. I mean,
24/7,
yeah,
basically. Yeah, in
I
a
run a
way. Yeah,
digital business. Yeah. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's not
exactly.
anti-tech, but
Yeah.
it is recognizing at a very deep level and a research-based level, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening with our relationship with the world around us? Why are we so drawn to the online world? Why are we trading off like all these other life-giving activities, real
Mm-hmm.
face-to-face relationships, spending time walking and breathing and having cups of tea without the phone and silence and solitude and journaling and art and music? Well, we're basically trading off humanity for time
Yeah.
on one device,
Mm-hmm.
and that is massively going to cost us. It is costing us, and we need to shift our paradigm. And then, obviously, once we're convicted enough and we understand our relationship with the online world, we understand where we're codependent, we understand where we're not. Well, then, yeah, then you can start to shift your practices. Does that
Mm-hmm.
answer your question? I mean, that
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
my thinking around the process.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean I'm very interested in that topic too, since I'm helping my clients clearing clutter, making space,
Mm,
not just in the physical but in the digital, in the social. I always say there's social clutter and often also mental, emotional, spiritual clutter, and I feel digital clutter is so sneaky. So, and we're yeah, because we don't like you physical. I always say you trip over physical clutter. You not necessarily realize if you're not paying attention what what digital clutter you're accumulating now,
mm,
and in and there is many different layers of digital clutter, but one is for sure what you're talking about is also we're almost addicted to this online world too, and part of it is man-made. So these companies kind of want us, of course, to spend time also on social media mostly, or even like on Google search for searching. Like I'm a huge researcher, so it's definitely needed that big first part of your book to make us think that one story, I don't think that was in the first part of the book, but you talked about this South Korean person who had a gaming addiction and died after 3 days of nonstop gaming or something. And I mean, this is the ultra extreme where we may be not necessarily heading towards, but as a business online business owner, we're like really walking this narrow trail of, okay, when is it too much, and when do we need to scale back?
Yeah, that was in my second section in one of the principles. So once you change your mind, you need to then, I believe, orientate your thinking around like principles that align with reality, that apply in all times and places. And so one of them is set limits and the value of setting limits, and that limits are life-giving when they're wise and self-induced or self-directed. And yeah, so I began with this person. I changed his name just because it was really hard to pronounce his name, and I also wanted to have some anonymity. But yeah, he went to an internet gaming lounge and did 3 days worth of gaming non-stop. He didn't eat or hardly ate, and he went to the toilet. That's it. And then he had a cardiac induced like death because of inactivity and just constantly being sleep deprived. But this isn't it's unusual, but it's not uncommon. No. It's happening all across Asia. It's actually happening in all countries, but particularly in Asian countries where there's internet gaming lounges. And internet addiction, I think, is seen as one of the 3 top health priorities for South Korea, which is fascinating. But it wasn't, again, I didn't say this story. I mean, it's clearly an extreme story, but the question I came with was, we know in young people there are pediatric society recommendations for how much screen time you should have. No more than 2 hours a day. Once you have more than 3 hours of social media and new media type activity per day as a teen, your suicide risk factors go up. So, I mean, we know the stats, but we don't know for adults what is a healthy limit when you and I work online and then we rest online. So all I was trying to say is, well, clearly there's a point where too much is unhelpful. Like, that's the extreme. 3 days of nonstop gaming where you die is probably bad for you. But of course, we need to recognize that there are really healthy, life-giving limits for how much time we spend online and what we do as adults. And that's a journey to regulate that and to try to work out, where is my time online draining my life and happiness and health and productivity, and where is it life-giving? And this is hard. And it's harder than in other areas. Like, we know with health, if you must set limits on how many calories you eat and how much time you spend on the couch. Otherwise, you're going to end up long-term, obese and unfit. You'll lose your energy. So you lose your personal freedom by not setting limits in terms of physical activity. Debt is the same. If you spend all your money, you experience this short-term burst of freedom when you're young. But then when you're my age, you don't have a house. You've lost so many opportunities. You've lost the benefit of accumulated wealth. And you might have the stress of financial debt. And so there's this irony where setting limits in your finances actually leads to freedom and leads to liberation and leads to more life. It'd be the same probably with your stuff with clutter. It's harder to reduce clutter in different areas, but you experience more life. Even in relationships, you really have to limit your habits and be selfless if you want to maintain a healthy, lasting marriage. You can't just go to the pub when you want. You can't spend what you want. You need to curtail some of your habits, put the toilet seat down, limit some of your activities so that you invest in a long-term interdependent relationship. We just haven't worked out what it means for us to do that in the digital world. And yet the logic is absolutely there. The research is indicating big flash signs of warnings all around us, but we haven't yet translated those kind of health warnings. We all know we need to eat well and exercise well, but do we all know we need to unplug from our phone and rest without devices? And do we know how to do that? And do we have those conversations at that deep level, which we have in the health field in every other area? It's time. And that's what I think Spacemaker is about.
Yeah, and I think this book is really helpful in that aspect. What I'm wondering is, so 2 things came to my mind. So one thing I always say is, like, our brain is so much by nature wants to have short-term pleasure over over like you can tell the brain, oh no, you shouldn't eat the cookie now because you want to be like healthy still when you're 70, but then the brain tells you, well, who cares when I'm 70, I want a cookie now. No,
Yeah.
we're like it's this short-term pleasure that goes over the long-term discipline that that often trips us up. No. And then the other thing that I feel like, even though we all know we should move more, we should eat healthier and everything, there is still so many people are not doing it because they're sick and tired of maybe people like us, you or me, telling them like, now with like so sometimes I'm thinking like, people don't want to hear about me telling them they shouldn't clutter up their life, no, because and it has all these benefits if you don't have clutter, and they just look at me blank and think like, yeah, but I want to enjoy my life now and whatever. So I don't know how we can solve that how would you want to call this? It's kind of like human nature, no, that we are actually more concerned, or actually, at least our primitive brain. I'm a little bit of a geek when I'm reading neuroscience and stuff like that. So our primitive brain is so much more wanting to have the short-term benefits, avoiding pain, and being efficient, and it needs so much energy to not give in. No, so talk a little bit how you deal with this, because I mean, people always think like my home looks like an Instagram post, which it doesn't. It's not about how it looks, it's what you do, how aware you are, whether you live with intention, or how you call it, from the inside out. No, so but we are all still tempted with this, rather want to have short-term pleasure rather than unplugging. And
Oh, definitely. Look, and I mean the self-care industry, there's self-help industry, you know, and you and I suppose we'd be in that industry. I mean, it's funny, my book was the best personal development book, and I'd never even heard of that term before. I'm like, oh, I suppose I am a personal development person. And oh mate, you know, you hear like there are so many, you've got to fix your money, you've got to have good relationships, you've got to do this and that. And now I'm saying exactly. You've got to actually be aware of how much time you spend online. And it's exhausting, isn't it? Living in this world where, I mean, we're hyper individualized. And so, you know, all of our self-care is actually our responsibility, as opposed to, let's say, shared cultures like in Asia, where actually the culture it's the culture's responsibility, the community's responsibility, where you find your identity. And so like the pressure is on for us because every individual has to make their own way. And so I recognize how exhausting that is. And so my heart isn't certainly not to say, oh, feel guilty because you don't have space. feel bad because now you're on technology, and not only are you feeling addicted, but now you feel bad for being addicted. So what am I trying to say? I mean, this is why I think I finished the book by saying that you can have all the techniques in the world, you can have all the right ideas, and I tell another story where I knew how to do my to-do lists, and I was teaching people about getting their inbox to zero and all this stuff. And then I found myself out of space again. And I actually tell a story about how I realized, and it was through reading a story from the Older Testament, it was reading scripture, but essentially it's a story where the person in the book kind of through an act of faith sacrifices what he doesn't have, and then God provides all he needs through it. And again, it's not a religious book, but that was a transformative story for me. And I needed to finish with it because for me, what I've realized is I can only speak for me, but I will never win the battle against space by having all the right techniques and by doing all the right things, by being really organized and really self-disciplined. Even if I do that, and even when I have done that, I've ended up at times where I'm completely stuffed, you know, and I'm busier than I've ever been before. And there's this spiritual nature to time, actually, and a spiritual aspect to space that it's when what in my life, I mean, I'll use the term God, but when I surrender my time to God, when I give God my first fruits of my time, and in that situation, I chose to actually stop working so much, start resting more. I went on a mountain and walked and prayed and meditated for half a day every week. And then everything worked out fine. Like actually that was what the solution for space was, to actually stop working and stop trying and to give up actually trying to make space, because I felt that that's what I was being called to do. And I actually found that that was the best thing I could do. So I didn't explain that very well. It's probably better to read it as I wrote it. But my point is, sometimes you only find space by surrendering it, by giving up trying, by not doing it in your own strength, by relying on what I would say is God's grace. And there's this paradox of space making. You need to learn the skills and be organized and disciplined and set limits. And you need to realize that you'll never win. You'll never get there in your own strength. And we need to walk in that beauty of humanity, which is broken, that is unable to do it all yourself. I don't know. You might be able to explain that better than I've explained it, but time is spiritual. It's not just physical, and you won't win it in your own way alone.
No, of course not. It's often what I say too is like with the physical clutter or with any clutter for that matter, because it's like you can't be getting to a point where you are decluttered. It doesn't work because there's always stuff coming in again. I mean, maybe not clutter per se, but there's stuff coming into your home. You have new interests where you buy things because you want them, and other things that were important once to you are not important anymore. So it's evolving. So I think we have to embrace the being imperfect, no? Which is sometimes
that's a good
hard.
way of saying embrace the being imperfect. And surrender the need to control everything.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe embracing also the 80-20. No, if we're getting 80% there, it's all good, no? And then leaving maybe 20% chaos or 20% area somewhere where we're not really where we want to be with making space, just coming from some compassion and grace for ourselves too. So one thing I often say is clearing clutter is self-love. So it's about finding the right balance that works for you, which also changes probably from day to day, from year to year, the older we get, or the like different life phases we have, no? So, and just not thinking we have the answer. And I also often say too, like, we can Google all we want. There is millions of articles about how to declutter, and possibly, I don't know how many you found about digital clutter, but I'm sure there is millions too. And it all doesn't help unless we're actually finding it in ourselves why we want to change something for us. That's kind of where I would want to go with that.
Definitely. I do like the Apostle Paul says, I don't do what I do want to do, and I do what I don't want to do. What a wretched man am I. And he's not trying to say he hates himself, but he's trying to recognize that there's something about humanity where, we don't do our best intentions, and then we do the things we don't want to do. And actually, like you said, like the word I would use in terms of my book is, we'll never have space. We'll never have this complete calm and peace. I mean, I do talk about, sometimes I talk to churches and I say in heaven, there won't be any, email notifications, and there won't be any Instagram scrolling. We won't have this busy, frantic work, and we won't have a lot of the, the media crap that just hits us day by day, on the polarization. And like, so we can, we know what like heaven's not. So maybe we can aim for that a bit more here in this world and work out, what really matters and what doesn't. And yet at the same time to recognize actually there's no utopia in this world. And so, we're going to wrestle with space, and we're going to wrestle with clutter. It's going to be ongoing for the rest of our lives. But again, in my book at the end, I say, but for me, I've come to peace with that, because it's in wrestling with in wrestling with being an A-type personality, of loving work, of loving starting things, and constantly finding that I have space and then I don't, and I have space and I don't. That wrestle with space is actually what has made me who I am. It's strengthened my character. It's clarified my values. It's called me to turn to God in faith and to surrender and not know, to not be able to fix myself when I kick holes in doors. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the very wrestle with the lack of space and feeling cluttered is what makes me a healthier, more mature person. And so I'm really grateful for that. And so I don't hate the wrestle anymore. I just accept the wrestle and of course do the things that I know work to help me mainly have space and mainly not have clutter.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had a thought when you were talking. It's like in nature, that is nature. No, sometimes it's light, then it's dark, or we have the ocean. It is high tide and it's low tide, and is this kind of like life? No, it's a pulsating, and if you can more go with that and kind of like live, create space while going with, like, sometimes I'm busier and I have less space, but I know there is times again where I have more space when you can make peace with that. I think that is already very, very helpful, because then you don't use excess energy on spinning out on why you're not having space right now, instead of just surrendering to, okay, now it's this way, and then it comes that way again. So we talked a lot about like the big picture, but would you have or did you see with the people you work with one easy avoidable mistake that people make when it comes to creating space? Can you spot something that you say, okay, well, this is really easily avoidable?
Look, yes. I mean, it's probably lots of small things. With the clients I work with, because I'm mainly working with leaders and executives, simple thing is email. Don't have notifications, and don't have a second screen for Outlook, and make sure that you're not starting and ending the day with Outlook, and don't see emails that come in constantly throughout the day. Make sure you have periods of time where you are not seeing any email notifications, not seeing email, and that you are batching your emails in particular times where you process to zero. We talk about how to do that, and yet have times when you're not doing email, and trust that actually if there's an hour and a half or even 2 hours between when you're scanning your email and when you get a response, the world won't collapse. And actually those small spaces which allow you to single task rather than constantly multitask and allow email and all the churn of what happens on email to change your day by day, that is a really helpful way of making space. And it's all research based, continuous processing. So reading and responding to emails in real time, or just scanning them as they pop up throughout the day. That's a terrible way of working, and it's very unproductive. Much better to process in blocks of time and have time when you're not looking at email. So that's one little tip. I mean, there's heaps of tips in the book, but I don't know if that helps. That's one tip. That's one tip. Turn off your notifications and don't look at email throughout the day when you're working. It'll destroy your long-term productivity.
Yeah, and like you said, it's based in research, and I forgot now how it's called, but that context switching, it's called. Like every time you context switch, it takes a lot of time then to get back into what we were doing before, and that just for an email that you're scanning real quick and then thinking, oh, I have no time right now, and then you're trying to go back to what you were doing, which is very counterproductive, no? So,
yeah, totally. So the research says, I think when people are doing a concentrated task and they scan an email, I think 15% of the time they get caught up in the email and then they just never return and finish the important task that they were starting. And even if they do return, their concentration is broken, and it can take up to 10 to 15 minutes to get back into the zone, which means they never get into the zone. We've just lost the ability to be in the zone and get things done well. When I'm training people, sometimes I'll say to people, okay, well, count to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, I think it's A to J, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Now flip between one and the other, A1, B2, and it's so much harder. And that's what multitasking is. Yeah. And so the imagination of Email Ninja, which is our training course, or one of them is to single task your way through the day so that you have, you do email processing really well, and you need some habits around that. And then you don't look at anything, no email, you do that really well, and you focus on like a conversation without scanning or a meeting or a document or whatever you need to focus on. And then, you work on your actions and you do that really efficiently, like your to-do list. But but you don't do it all at the same time, which is what most of us do with a second screen on Outlook. I mean, that's just one. Obviously, email is one very small aspect of work, and it's an even smaller aspect of life. But there's one area you can make some space.
Well, when I look at some of my clients, it's actually not such a small area of their life because it's omnipresent, like you just said. I mean, or then they have I think the worst I saw was 11,500 and something unopened email, like that little red bubble showed that on their phone. And
I've coached someone with 65,000 emails
65.
in the inbox.
Okay,
no,
you
and
beat
30,000 unread, which is what you're talking about. So, but that is my job, to go into people's inboxes and to unclutter them.
Yeah,
So.
and I said I just get an anxiety attack just thinking about it. I can't even imagine having to look. And how much do they say? They say we look at our phone 3,000 times a day or whatever. I mean, that would be 3,000 little anxiety attacks that I would get. So I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, but definitely. The research says when people stop looking at email in real time and spend less time on email, their perceived stress reduces. So their experience of stress in the workplace reduces. Yeah. So it's actually a workplace and health and safety issue now. It's not just a productivity issue.
Yeah. So you talked about your course. So tell my listeners a little bit, where can they find you? Where can they find your courses? Where can they find your book?
Yes, it looks Spacemaker is everywhere. So I'd love you to pick up a copy on Amazon or whatever your preferred bookstore is. And you can also hear it on audiobook, on audio. I do love the physical book, though. It's beautiful. Pick up the paper book and get offline. I have a website called spacemakers.com.au. The AU is for Australia. And look, we've got free resources if you want to know about a digital Sabbath or a weekly day off. There's videos and things like that. I have a blog post, but we also run training, as you mentioned, to people all around the world. I have a trainer in Vancouver, and obviously we've got trainers in Australia. But, with this beautiful new digital world, we can train a team in 3 to 4 hours. I've got clients in New York that I'll train as long as we can work out the time zone. So I've got Email Ninja, how to get your inbox to zero, List Assassin, how to get things done by organizing your life with a to-do list methodology, Priority Samurai, how to make priorities and set priorities, and we have making space training. So much less interesting as a name than all the other ridiculous names, but
they sound like martial art. Like we need martial art for our daily work.
Yeah, we actually give people ninja figurines to stand up at their desk if they get their inbox to zero. But and making space training is about the book and how to create digital wellness in your team. I'd love a conversation if you're interested. Just look at my website and book a Zoom call.
Yeah, I will put all the links in the show notes so people can easily find it. Do you have any last words of wisdom or any tips? Or did I not ask something that you wished I would have asked before we wrap up?
Well, the only thing I'd say, I wanted to have a conversation with you, Conny, because I look at the words and language and the why that you have. And we started our business saying that we're passionate about helping people make space in the clutter of life by shifting the way they live and work. That's our tagline, I suppose, or our elevator pitch. And I heard the way that you talk about clutter and space and helping people think. And I'm like, wow, we do it differently, but we actually have the same why in many ways. And I think that's beautiful. And space goes beyond a particular form. It's something that goes to the core of our spirituality and our humanity. I think that's where you and I would connect. So if you need your house and your life uncluttered, go to yourself, maybe some digital stuff for me, but I don't know. I like that we have the same why from different parts in the world, and we're trying to work with people in the same way.
Yeah, thank you. I thought that too. Also, it's like, I think it was in the second part when you talk about patterns. You say you start small and realistic and everything, and that's one thing I always say, like a few minutes a day keeps the chaos away. And we only make progress actually when we start small, I find, because you need to change the behaviors, which you talked about way at the beginning of our conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy day, Daniel, and sharing your wisdom with me and my audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.